Hi, I'm Dana. I stopped talking to my entire family around 2 years ago, and then my mum died back in August. So I've spent a good amount of time looking back on my childhood and reflecting on it and sort of just trying to figure it out so that I can, heal from it and process it and deal with the shit that I need to deal with. And I found it really hard, to be honest with you, and I felt like I've had to really do a lot of it on my own. Because even with the autism stuff, it felt like I could find a lot of people similar enough to me online. I did end up making a whole channel because I was like, nobody's quite like me, and that's caused me to find lots of people that are just like me. But when it comes to the family stuff that I talk about, there's a handful of people on TikTok that talk about it in a similar way, which has made me want to talk about it more. But I don't see that many people talking about it, and there's so much stuff that if people had talked about it, if I'd seen it talked about and seen it referred to as abuse and things that weren't okay, I think I would have been able to realise a lot of things and process a lot of things a lot sooner. So that's sort of the purpose of this. It is going to be a little bit trauma dumpy, and I am probably going to overshare a little bit, but it's stuff that I think a lot of people probably go through, and it's normalised. We normalise it completely and we don't realise there's anything fucking wrong with it until we realise that there's definitely something really wrong with it. So yeah, so I've always said that my parents were they could be very manipulative, they could be quite emotionally abusive and emotionally neglectful. I've always based that my family's abuse was very mental and emotional. And then I was having a conversation with a friend the other day, and we ended up talking. Sorry, this is going to be a bit stuttery and stammery. I'm not very good at talking about it. It makes me not feel good. And I'm autistic, so I start to my verbal things don't do that well. But luckily for you, I can edit out a lot of it, so I will try to make it a decent enough video to watch. I was talking to this friend and I was like, yeah, but my mum didn't hit me, she tapped me. That was the thing. It was always, anytime my mother hit me, which she did semi-regularly, she didn't hit me, it was just a tap. It was just a smack. Why are you being silly? And there were plenty of times that I would be like, that hurt. You just hurt me. And she'd just be like, no, I didn't. It was I was actively being hit. And yes, I wasn't being beaten up, it wasn't awful physical abuse. But regularly up until the age of 14, 15, usually while she was brushing my hair for school, or it was usually in the mornings when I was trying to get ready for school and I was already extremely overwhelmed. And even now I want to be and obviously that was very difficult for her. And I don't care how hard it is, you don't hit your child and then gaslight them into thinking that you don't hit them. I went to a young carers group and we regularly had various social workers in the house because of my oldest brother being autistic. And there were times that people straight up asked me as a child, do your parents hit you? And I was like, no, of course they don't be ridiculous. And I didn't think I was lying, because every time that my mother would hit me, she told me, no, I didn't hit you, it was just a smack, it was just a tap, it was just this, it was just that, it didn't hurt, don't be silly. And like I say, she wasn't beating me, she wasn't punching me, it was a smack, it was a slap, and it hurt, it stung, sometimes she'd catch me with the end of her finger, sometimes it'd be with the fucking hairbrush. She hit me. And she just gaslighted me well enough that up until literally this conversation I was having with a friend, anyone I spoke to, I'd be oh yeah, my parents never hit me, my parents were never physically abusive. And yes, she was. She hit me semi-regularly. And I really think that the only reason she stopped as I got into my teen years, I would have done it back. We had so many face-offs where she'd be like, oh, so you hate me now, do you? And I'd be like, yeah, I do, because you're treating me like this. I would like to think I was fairly logical and fairly well, you're doing this action, so yes, I don't like being treated like that. And I think me starting to respond to arguments like that and being no, what you're doing isn't okay though. She knew that if she'd slapped me, I'd have fucking slapped her back. I wouldn't have hesitated, I wouldn't have even thought about it. It wouldn't have been a choice that I made. It would have just been, if you fucking hit me, I'm hitting you back. I'm sorry, I am. And alongside that, there were always threats of violence, and there was this vibe of well, we're not actually going to carry through, so I can just threaten you and it's fine. And it's but you are hitting me. So that's probably why when you threatened physical violence against me as a child, it scared shit out of me, because I didn't know that it was just a threat and you weren't actually going to do it, because you were hitting me and then telling me that you weren't. So I was being physically hurt by you, and then I'd be upset, I'd be crying, and they'd be oh, I'll fucking give you something to cry about in a minute. Scared me. It scared me. I didn't know that was just a little jokey joke threat to make me stop crying. I thought that they were going to give me something to cry about because I was being hit like most fucking mornings, you know? Like, there are much, much worse forms of abuse to go through. But I've spent my entire life acting as though my parents never ever hit me when they absolutely did. They just didn't call it that and gaslit me out of thinking of it in that way. And similarly, like when we were out and I was having meltdowns in public places, she'd be like, do you want a slapped ass? Do you want a slap? And people would look at her and she'd be like, oh, it's alright, I don't actually hit them. And it's like, you literally do though. Like, I really think she'd gaslit herself into thinking that what she was doing wasn't hitting me when it's literally what she was doing. She was moving her hand with speed and force towards my body and hitting me with it. Like, but it wasn't up until having this conversation where I was looking into my friend's face and being like, that's hitting me, isn't it? Like, you can be like, oh, it was just a tap, it was just a smack. But she hurt me. Like, duh. But like, just completely normalised and gaslit out of me to the point where I was like, oh no, my parents never hit me, don't be ridiculous. And even at the time I'd be like, oh god, no. When like, literally yes. And like that was focused on my mum, but to focus on my dad, he wasn't around as often. Like, he lived in the house with us. My parents were together throughout my childhood. I was 16 when they eventually split up. But like, he was just never actually there, you know? Like, he was never in the room. Like, we watched TV of an evening and stuff, but like, in the day-to-day happenings of the household, he wasn't there. He was either at work, he was in his office, he was up in his bedroom. Like, my dad just wasn't around for the vast majority of my childhood. Like, he technically was, he was just over there, but there was a closed door. You know, he wasn't having anything to do with us. Which meant that he was used as the threat. You know, if we'd done something that, well, I say we, it was me. Like, I include my brothers on a lot of it, but they had a very different childhood to me and they're 8 and 9 years older than me, and it doesn't really apply to them. It was me. When I'd done something that really pissed my mum off, when it was something that she saw as like really bad behaviour, like I'd really been naughty, she'd be like, I'm going to tell your dad. And I would be in like a full screaming meltdown, be like, please don't tell dad, please don't tell dad. Because he'd never hit me. Like, I remember one time as a very, very young child that he did like the very typical dad thing of literally putting me over his knee and like slapping me. And I think he felt really fucking bad about that, honestly. Like, I don't remember the context of like what I'd done or why it happened, but I'm fairly sure I remember him crying afterwards and it never happened again. So I do sort of think that my mum probably talked him into it, because it was always very much her being like, Dana's done this and you need to punish her, you need to tell her off now because she's not listening to me. And because he wasn't around as much and he wasn't the one that was usually doing the discipline, it scared the absolute living fucking daylights out of me. I couldn't predict what was going to happen. I didn't know what he was going to do, you know. Like, if I was in trouble with my mum, I knew she was going to shout at me for a bit, she was going to send me to my room, might get a slap across like back of the head or on like my shoulder or something, and that'll be that, you know. I might get grounded, she might be in a fucking pissy horrible mood with me for a few weeks. But I could predict that. I knew where it was going, I knew what was going to happen. When it was something where she was like, we're telling your dad now, absolutely scared the shit out of me. And like, I got on reasonably well with my dad, especially as a little kid. I was considered a daddy's girl, and like, he was the person I went to when I was upset and things like that. But when I was in trouble with him, he was just completely unpredictable, and it scared the absolute fuck out of me. And it's the kind of thing where it's like, I do feel like they manipulated that situation, you know. That was what they wanted. Like, my mum wanted me to be absolutely shit fucking scared. And that's not a position you should be putting a child in. It's not an appropriate thing to do to a child. You know, and again, it's the kind of thing where I was very much gaslit into thinking that nothing actually abusive ever happened within my household. But one of the big things that stuck with me is a memory of my dad, and something that I still think about semi-regularly because of like the repeated situations I've had that have been similar, is when we were moving to Denmark, my parents had me sell loads of my fucking stuff. Like, I was 10 years old and I had to get rid of like 90% of my fucking belongings, and it was heartbreaking to me. You know, like, I had collections of China dolls and porcelain bears and videotapes, and I had to just get rid of it all, and it devastated me. It really, really fucking upset me. So there'd been this one day right before we moved that we'd gone out, and I was obsessed with The Mummy as a kid, and I'd found a new version of The Mummy that I hadn't seen before on VHS, because I was obsessed with the Rachel Weisz one. I'm gay, like, get over. Like, so I'd found one of like the really, really vintage ones and bought it on VHS tape from the charity shop, and I bought it home all excited, and I remember I had it like on my chest like this, walking through the fucking kitchen to get to my bedroom, and my dad was sat at the table and he was like, what's that? And I was like, oh, it's my new Mummy VHS tape. And he's like, so you're just buying VHS tapes when you know that you need to get rid of stuff so that we can move? And I was like, I just want to see it. Like, I just want to watch it. You can get rid of it afterwards if you want me to. Like, I just really want to see this movie. And it's, you know, I'm 10 years old, it's 2007, this is the only way I have to watch films. The bit of it that I really, really vividly remember is my dad, like, pulling it out of my hands. And, like, I had it like that, so it hurt, like, my chest and my arm. And he just fucking threw it, and it just shattered everywhere. Like, he threw it with so... My dad was also 6'8" and weighed, like, probably around 25 stone. Like, my dad was fucking massive. And a lot of the time that was a very comforting aspect of him. But his anger was just so unpredictable. I never knew how it was gonna go. And he would, like, it didn't happen often. Like, my dad was not a generally angry person. But, I'd say maybe once a year. Maybe slightly more. But, you know, like, say once every 9 months, I'd do something that just either enraged him, like, with that videotape. Or I'd do something that my mum would go and, like, rile him up about, you know? Like, so many things I'd hear and be like, okay, that's not that big a deal, just ground her. And my mum would keep going and keep going at him and keep going at him until he was also fucking pissed off. And that was when he would come out and be like, you're getting punished now. And it was terrifying. And there was never sort of, like, any discussion of it as well, is the thing, is everything that I talk about on here about my parents and my family is stuff that I tried to bring up to them when I was like 20, 21, 22. You know, these were discussions that I wanted to have so that I could process it, so that they could fucking apologise to me, quite frankly, and we could move on from it. And it was just, no, that didn't happen. It didn't happen like that. You know, it didn't happen the way you're thinking, oh, you're just oversensitive, you know? And, like, I should not have been having to feel that level of fear towards one of my parents as a child. My next little one is that they lied about the most random bullshit. And this is one that's really bothering me just lately, because the Robbie Williams movies come out, and part of my, like, childhood lore that we used to tell as a family, and that I've told people semi-recently that I'm now, like, about, because my entire family had this thing of my brothers went to the same school as Robbie Williams. They went to the same high school. Robbie Williams has songs about these specific teachers that my brothers had, specifically one called Mr. Young. Like, this was a elaborate tale. Everything was in place, you know? Like, I had no reason to question or doubt it whatsoever. So when the Robbie Williams movie came out, I googled it because I was like, oh, I wonder, like, exactly which songs are about which teachers, and, like, this will be a fun little thing to look up in an evening. He grew up, like, 50 miles away from us. He didn't go to the same high school. He didn't live in the same fucking village. Like, he was, you know, 50 miles up road. Like, he was nearby. But this entire elaborate family tale that I used to get told all the fucking time, like every time we heard a Robbie Williams song, and I grew up in the noughties, so that was quite fucking often, this whole big elaborate story, it's just a lie. It's just absolute bullshit. And I had, like, an awareness of, like, my family bullshit. My family tell lies, my family pretend things don't happen. I had an awareness of that. And especially my middle brother just makes things up. When I took my first girlfriend to meet my family and we were sat having dinner, he started telling her stories about these, like, racetracks we'd been on together and how he's so good at driving, and we did this together and we went here together. And she kept looking at me like, oh, and I kept looking at her like, no, this didn't happen. I don't know why he's telling you this, because it's absolute bollocks. Like, it never happened, you know? So the last couple of weeks, anytime I remember something, or anytime I think something that, like, might have come from my family, I'm having to fucking Google it and be like, is this real? Is this true? I feel like so much of my base knowledge and my, like, childhood lore is fabricated. It's just lies. I don't understand why they did it. And it's one of those things that, like, I'm aware it isn't really that big a deal, but it's kind of just distressing me at the minute. I don't like it. Why have you done that? Why did you lie to me? And that's the thing as well, is that it's not even like they lied to me. It was literally like they were making up these lies, all of us together. And, like, I didn't know it was bullshit. I didn't know that it was a fabrication, but they'd all add to it, you know? So obviously I thought it was real because I've got 4 people being like, yeah, that's definitely legit. And it baffles me. I don't understand it at all. I don't get it. It's really fucking weird. And the final, Otis is fully having a wash on my laptop. But the final little thing I want to talk about is a really serious one that I have definitely brought up before because it's been on my mind for, like, the last few years now, which is they not only left me to get groomed as a 16-year-old by a 21-year-old, but they kind of encouraged it. Like, they kind of helped with it, you know? You don't know, I do need to explain. So I met my first boyfriend when I was 16. He was 21. he started staying over at my house like immediately. I wanted sleepovers. I was so excited to have my first boyfriend. I thought it was the best thing in the whole entire world. And my parents let that happen. My dad at one point had a very brief like, isn't he a little bit old for you? And I was like, you're 11 years older than my mother. And he didn't bring it up again. That was that. My mum never brought it up. About 3 months after we'd gotten together, she saw us kiss and she was like, oh, I thought he was gay. All your friends were always gay. And I was like, no, that's my boyfriend. And she was like, oh, all right then. I think it was like another 2 or 3 months after that it turned out my mum insisted they weren't breaking up. My dad said they were breaking up and he moved out. My mum would go back and visit. They never had any intentions of getting divorced. I don't really know what the fucking situation was, to be entirely honest with you. It confused me at the time. I still don't understand. And my dad died like a year and a half later, and we then found documentation in his house that made us think that he probably knew that was going to happen and maybe thought it was like a kindness to just get at. Anyway, my dad had moved out and my mum didn't want me there. You know, like she made it feel pretty fucking clear. A tradition for our house was that we always put up all the Christmas decorations together. And that year I'd been out and she told me we're doing it on this day. And I was like, okay, I'll be home at this time. Is that good? And she was like, yeah, whatever, do what you want. And I was like, okay. So I get home from college at like 2, 3 p.m. and she'd already put everything up. She'd already decorated the house for Christmas, just her and my brother without me. And I was like, okay, that's really hurtful actually. Great, thank you. And it was stuff like that all the time where like I'd come home and she'd be cooking and I'd be like, oh, what are you making? And she'd tell me. I'd be like, oh, that sounds nice. And she'd be like, mm-hmm. I'd be like, okay. And I'd just go up to my room and like, if she'd just been cooking herself a meal, I think I'd have been like, fair enough. But it was the fact that I'd come down and she'd have made a full meal for her and my brother and they'd be sat there eating together having a nice little meal time and I'd just be like, do I fucking exist? Like, okay, fuck me. So then she started being like, are you gonna move out with your dad then? And I was like, I really don't want to fucking move out with my dad. Like, I'm gonna have to care for him. I don't want to. I'm 16 years old. That's a very large responsibility. And I was still in college at the time. And she started just encouraging me to move in with my dad. Not because I could look after, like, some of it was because I could look after him. But the main thing that she pushed and, like, manipulated me with was, oh, but you'll be so much closer to your boyfriend. He lives over there. You'll be so much closer to him. Why don't you move in with him? You know, it's that kind of thing. Like, she really, like, pushed me away from her and the family unit towards this man that was 5 years older than me as a 16-year-old. Like, if you're 25 and 30, that's one thing. 16 and 21 is fucking weird. Why are you interested in a child at 21? And she didn't question that. She fully pushed me towards him. Was like, get out of my hair, go with your man, fuck off. And I did. And then I spent 8 years with him. 9 years living with him because I couldn't find a fucking place to live and that was horrible. And throughout those 8 years, there were multiple times that I would do something wrong. We'd have some sort of argument, like he was abusive. So like shit, I would be abused. I would go to my mum's house in the middle of the night, sobbing, crying, being like, he's literally kicked me out in my pajamas with no shoes, locked the door, won't let me back in, like things like that. And I'd go up to my mum's and she'd be like, well, what did you do? You need to treat, he's your boyfriend. You need to treat him right. You need to do what he wants you to do. And, you know, this is another area where I'm like, I understand that that's how my mother was raised. I understand that she was very much given the message of like, you do what you need to make your marriage work. But I wasn't fucking married to him. I was 16, 17, 18 years old. She had previously left an abusive relationship before getting with my dad, who like, you know, had his issues. I'm not saying it was like a perfect relationship. And I'm never going to understand what my parents' relationship was really like and all of that. I don't think my dad was abusive towards her. I'm sure they had their moments, but she'd left an abusive relationship that, from everything I heard, sounded very fucking similar to the one that I was in. And yet she encouraged me to stay and made me feel like anything that happened between us was my fault and I'd done wrong and I needed to just shut my fucking mouth and cook and clean and look after him like I was supposed to. You know, and being that age, I had a bunch of various like government people when we went to various appointments and stuff that would be like, are you okay in this relationship? He is a lot older than you. Someone his age shouldn't necessarily be interested in someone your age. And because my parents had validated and to a good point encouraged it, I was like, oh, don't be silly. He loves me and I love him and everything's perfect. And then entered into one of the most traumatizing eras of my life. I know I said that was my last point, but I feel like I need to add the extra little thing here of I really fucking wanted to have a family. I really wanted my family to work and to like me. So these are all things that I tried to discuss and bring up. And so many times my mum would be like, well, you did this, well, you did this. And I'd be like, yeah, mum, but I was 9 years old and you were like 37. Like, I think she was old. Like, if I was 9 years old, my mum would have been 41, you know? Like, I feel like you should have known better. I feel like you shouldn't have been mean to a child. But she fully acted as though, even in like early childhood, I was making these like rude, horrible, manipulative decisions to try and fuck with her. I don't know. I really don't get it. I don't think I'm ever going to understand, but I do think that I'm starting to be able to like process and deal with it in a way that I've not been able to in the past. And it's one of those things where I do feel like sometimes I have to like really wallow in it and like let myself sit in it and think about it all and go through it all and get really angry and upset about it. And like, I think essentially I didn't feel what I should have at the time because I just needed to get through shit. So sometimes I have to just sit there and fucking feel it now and deal with how I should have felt at the time. And then I'm like, oh, okay, that's sort of like, not necessarily like an emotionless memory now, but it's something that I can think about without being like, get rid of it, push it down, don't think about it, you know? So yeah, that's the whole video. I am more than fucking ready to stop talking now. You can follow me in places, they'll be linked down below. There's Instagram, TikTok, Blue Sky, Ko-fi, Patreon. Do what you will. You don't have to do anything. You can if you want. If you wanted to like and subscribe, my content is entirely about like familial abuse and autism at this point, so it's really fun here. It's really fun being me. I'm having a great time. No, like I feel like shit at the minute and life kind of sucks right now, but I feel like it's the type of thing that once I come out on the other side of this bit of burnout and this bollocks that I'm in, I think I'll be doing a lot better than I previously was, you know? I think this is just sort of like the low before the high. I've got to have some degree of fucking hope, okay? I'm trying, I'm hoping, I'm praying. I'm not praying, I don't believe in shit. Sometimes I pray to the universe, but then one time when I did that, my favourite drummer died. I thought it was my fault, so we don't really do that anymore. Whoever you are, wherever you are, I hope you have a lovely morning, evening, day, afternoon, week, month, year, and I will see you again in a couple of days.